The morning of the wedding was bright and cruel. Sunlight poured through the glass windows like melted gold. Everyone in the house moved fast, smiling for the cameras. Minh Vy walked quietly, holding a bouquet that wasn't hers. She had helped plan every detail of her sister's wedding. The flowers, the playlist, the color of the ribbons, everything perfect. Her mother had said, "Do it for the family name." So she did, even when her own heart felt heavy. Lam Khan, her fiancé, had promised to arrive later. He said he had a business meeting before the ceremony. She trusted him. She always did. But when she stepped outside to check the garden decorations, she stopped. By the fountain, under the amber leaves, two figures stood close. An Enhiern in her wedding dress, and Lam Khan, his hand brushing her cheek like it belonged there. The air left Minh Vy's lungs. The laughter from the guests turned distant, hollow. She wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. But their eyes said everything. It wasn't the first time. They moved like people who had practiced their lies for months. Minh Vy dropped the flowers. Petals scattered like pieces of something already broken. She turned away before they could see her. Inside the hall, music began to play. She felt her pulse matching every beat of the drum. Her sister was walking down the aisle. Her fiancé was waiting at the altar. And she stood in the back, invisible, holding her own silence. When the priest spoke of love and truth, she almost laughed. Her mother glanced at her, smiling for the crowd. No one noticed the trembling in her hands. The ceremony ended with applause and champagne. Minh Vy forced a smile for every photograph. Her sister kissed her cheek. The scent of perfume and betrayal burned her throat. Later, she escaped to the dressing room. She opened her phone, scrolling through old messages from Lam Khan. Promises, plans, dreams, all written in the language of lies. She stared at their engagement photo. They looked happy, naive, unprepared for the storm. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Family first, emotions later. But what if the family was the one that ruined her heart? She sat there, eyes dry, heart empty. Outside, laughter filled the garden again. Glasses clinked. Music swelled. And under the sound of joy, Minh Vy made a quiet promise. She would find out when the betrayal began. She would learn how deep the lies went. And one day, they would look at her, not as the quiet daughter, but as the woman who finally saw everything. She wiped her eyes, stood up and walked back to the party. Her smile returned, but it wasn't kindness anymore. It was armor. It was the beginning of truth. Days turned into weeks, but the image never left her mind. The hand, the touch, the quiet betrayal under the autumn sun. Minh Vy smiled for everyone, but inside, something cracked open. She no longer believed in words, only in proof. At night, she began searching through her memories like a detective. Old emails, forgotten photos, receipts tucked inside drawers. Each clue whispered a version of truth she had ignored. Her sister's voice on a message, soft and guilty. Her fiancé's phone number, saved under another name. The world she built on trust had been written on sand. One evening, she entered her father's study while everyone slept. The room smelled of old books and expensive lies. On the desk lay a folder with her name printed on it. She opened it slowly, heart pounding like a drum. Inside were legal documents, signatures that weren't hers. Contracts transferring her shares in the company to an Enhiern. All signed months before the wedding. Her stomach turned cold. Her mother's handwriting appeared at the bottom of each page. A witness, a mother, a conspirator. Minh Vy sank into the leather chair, papers trembling in her hands. So that was why they smiled at her like nothing had happened. They didn't just take her love. They took her future. Her education, her work, her trust, all rewritten in ink. Every memory now felt rehearsed, carefully staged for her blindness. She remembered her mother saying, "You're too kind for this world." Maybe kindness was just the shape of her own cage. She copied the papers and hid them inside her coat. The night air outside was heavy and quiet. Streetlights flickered as she walked home alone. She passed the family portraits hanging in the hall. Their faces looked perfect, frozen in their own performance. In her room, she spread the copies across the bed. Every page was a confession without words. She whispered to herself, they planned it together. The truth settled in her chest like a blade. She wanted to cry, but nothing came out. Instead, a strange calm filled her veins. If they could lie for years, she could wait for her moment. She began collecting more evidence. Old recordings, bank transfers, messages between her sister and her fiancé. Piece by piece, she rebuilt the story they tried to bury. She created a folder on her laptop labeled, "For the Light." Every night, she added something new. The sound of her sister's laughter now felt like an echo from another life. The next morning, she met her mother at breakfast. Her mother asked if she slept well. She smiled and said, "Perfectly." The game had changed, and no one noticed. Behind that calm face, a storm was waiting. She would not shout, not yet. Silence would be her weapon. And when the truth was ready, it would break louder than any scream. 3 months later, the mansion glittered again with light. Guests filled the hall, music played, laughter echoed like glass. It was the launch of the family's new company project. Every camera pointed toward the stage where her parents stood. Minh Vy stood at the back, dressed in black silk, silent. Her mother's voice carried through the microphone, calm and proud. "Tonight, we celebrate unity and legacy," she said with a smile. Unity. The word burned in Vy's chest like fire. She looked at her sister, standing beside their father. An Enhirn's diamond necklace sparkled, like a crown of deceit. Lamcon sat in the front row, clapping politely. The same man who once swore forever under the stars. The room blurred, but Vy's focus sharpened. It was time. When the speech ended, she walked toward the stage. The crowd turned as her heels struck the marble floor. She carried a small folder, pressed tightly against her chest. Her mother's smile faltered. Her sister froze mid-breath. Vi took the microphone. Her voice was steady, sharp as truth. "You speak of legacy," she said. "But what is built on lies cannot last." Murmurs rippled through the room. The guests looked at one another, confused, curious. Vi opened the folder. Papers fluttered like white fire in her hands. "These are contracts forged under my name," she continued. "They stole my inheritance, my trust, and called it family." Gasps filled the room. Her sister's face turned pale. Her mother stepped forward, whispering, "Stop this nonsense." Vi smiled. She reached into her pocket and pressed play on her phone. The speakers crackled, then a familiar voice filled the air. It was her mother's voice. "Just sign it, she'll never check. She trusts us too much." Then an Enhirn's laugh, soft and cruel. "She'll thank us when it's done." Silence fell like a heavy curtain. The guests stared, the cameras kept rolling. Her father lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. Lamcon stood slowly, color draining from his face. He whispered her name, but it meant nothing now. Vi's voice trembled, but not from fear. "For years, I stayed quiet to keep this family together. But silence doesn't heal lies, it feeds them." She looked straight at her mother. "I'm done feeding them." Security moved uncertainly, unsure if they should intervene. But no one dared touch her. She placed the documents on the podium. "Here is your legacy," she said softly. "Built on betrayal, signed in blood that was supposed to love me." The crowd erupted in whispers, flashes, and disbelief. Vi turned, her dress sweeping the floor like closing curtains. Behind her, the perfect image of the Trin family cracked. Applause followed her exit, not for celebration but for courage. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. For the first time, she could breathe. And for the first time, They had to face the truth. The next morning, the house was silent. No one called her name. No one asked her to come home. Her phone buzzed with messages, most of them cruel. You humiliated your family. You'll regret this. Even her father's message was short. You've gone too far. She stared at the screen until the light hurt her eyes. Then she turned it off and packed a small suitcase. The mansion that once felt like a cage now stood behind her like a ghost. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavy. By the time she reached the bus station, she was soaked. She didn't look back. She rented a tiny apartment near the city's edge. Peeling walls, flickering lights, silence thick as dust. For the first few days, she barely spoke. The betrayal echoed louder than traffic outside. But pain has a strange way of teaching strength. She began working in a small cafe, taking the morning shift. Her hands learned to serve strangers instead of expectations. Customers smiled, called her kind, not knowing her story. At night, she sat by the window with her laptop open. Every document, every recording, every piece of proof still there. The world had called her a liar. Now she would show them what truth really looked like. Weeks passed, and the scandal faded from the news. Her family stayed quiet, trying to repair their image. But whispers followed them wherever they went. And Hearn's company meetings ended in chaos. Her mother avoided every camera. Still, no one reached out to her. Until one afternoon, a man walked into the cafe. He ordered black coffee, no sugar. He looked familiar, but she couldn't place him. When he handed her the receipt, there was a card attached. Namdai, legal consultant. He spoke softly. I know what you did was brave, he said. I also know they forged more than one contract. Her heart stopped for a second. How do you know that? She asked. I used to work with your father, he replied. He told her about shell accounts, hidden transfers, silent partners. Her family's empire was built on shadows deeper than she knew. That night, they met again at a quiet diner. He laid the files on the table between them. This is enough to bring them down legally, he said. She stared at the evidence, her hands shaking. Not from fear, but from recognition. The truth was bigger than betrayal now. It was about justice. She nodded slowly. We'll do it right, she said. No revenge, just the truth. Nam smiled. Then let's begin. When she returned to her apartment, she stood by the window. The city lights reflected in her eyes like small fires. She wasn't broken anymore. She was rebuilding herself, one truth at a time. The courthouse smelled of paper, dust, and fear. Minh Vy walked through the corridor with calm steps. Her heart beat steadily, no longer trembling like before. Beside her, Nam carried the folder of evidence they had prepared. Months of research, documents, recordings, and hidden accounts. Each page told a story of betrayal, dressed as business. Reporters waited outside, their cameras flashing like lightning. Someone shouted her name, but she didn't turn around. She had learned that silence could speak louder than noise. Inside the courtroom, her mother sat at the defense table. An Hearn avoided her eyes, twisting her hands under the desk. Lam Khan was there too, summoned as a witness. The man who once promised forever now looked like a stranger. The judge called the room to order. The trial began. Nam spoke first, his voice steady and sharp. He presented every forged document, every financial transfer. Each detail connected like threads in a web of deceit. The defense tried to interrupt, but the evidence was undeniable. Recordings played through the speakers, her mother's voice again. She won't fight us, she's weak. Minh Vy didn't flinch. She watched their faces crumble under the weight of truth. For years, they had silenced her. Now they were the ones who couldn't speak. When it was her turn to testify, she stood slowly. The microphone felt cold in her hands. I didn't come here to destroy my family, she began. I came to stop the lies that destroyed love. Every word landed heavy in the quiet room. She looked at her sister. Tears filled in Enhirn's eyes, but guilt ran deeper than sorrow. Her mother refused to look up. The trial lasted 6 hours. When the verdict came, the world outside seemed to pause. The judge declared the contracts void and the assets restored. Fraud proven, reputation shattered. Her family's empire, built on greed, began to fall apart. Reporters rushed forward, shouting questions, but she walked past them. Nam placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's over," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No," she whispered, "it's just the beginning." The next day, news broke across every channel. Trin family scandal exposed. Daughter wins justice. Some called her brave, others called her cruel. But for the first time, she didn't care about opinions. She met her father in the hospital days later. He was frail, silent, ashamed. He couldn't defend the empire anymore. He only said, "You did what I never could." She left without answering. Outside, the sun rose between the clouds. Her phone buzzed with messages again, this time from strangers. People thanking her for speaking truth. She didn't reply. She simply watched the light stretch across the street. The truth had cost her everything she knew. But in that silence, she finally felt free. Winter came quietly, carrying a kind of peace she had never known. Snow covered the streets, softening the city's noise. Minh Vy moved into a small studio above the cafe where she worked. The days were simple now. Warm coffee, quiet music, clean air. Sometimes, she still woke from dreams of her old house. Voices calling her name, laughter that no longer felt real. But when she opened her eyes, only sunlight greeted her. Freedom, she realized, was not loud. It was the silence that no one could take away. One evening, a knock came at her door. When she opened it, her mother stood there. Older, smaller, eyes dimmed by months of shame. Neither spoke for a long time. The air between them carried years of pain and memory. Finally, her mother whispered, "You must hate me." Vi shook her head slowly. "I don't hate you," she said. "I just stopped waiting to be loved." Her mother's lips trembled. Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet and heavy. "I thought protecting our name would protect us all," she said. "But I lost you instead." Vi handed her a cup of tea. Steam rose between them, like forgiveness taking form. For the first time, they spoke without pretending. They talked about childhood, about the father's silence, about mistakes. No excuses, just truth. When her mother left, she turned at the door. "You were right," she said softly. "The truth doesn't destroy, it frees." Vi smiled, a small, tired smile that still carried hope. Days passed. An Enhirn sent a letter, handwritten and fragile. "I don't ask for forgiveness," it said. "I ask for peace." Vi folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Some wounds don't need to close. They just need to stop bleeding. She visited her father's grave in spring. The grass had grown long, the wind gentle. She placed a single white flower on the stone. "I hope you found your silence," she whispered. When she stood up, the world felt lighter. The shadows that once haunted her now walked behind her quietly. She no longer needed revenge, nor approval. Truth had already done its work. It had stripped everything false until only strength remained. At the cafe, customers greeted her with warmth. Nam still came sometimes, sitting in the corner with his black coffee. They didn't need to speak much. Some connections are built from shared silence. One evening, as the sun sank into the city skyline, she stepped outside. The wind carried the scent of rain and new beginnings. She looked up, eyes calm, heart steady. Everything she lost had turned into clarity. She had faced love, lies, and the fire of truth, and survived. And as the first drops of rain touched her skin, she whispered, "This is what freedom feels like." The morning light spilled through her window like quiet forgiveness. Minh Vy stood with a cup of coffee, watching the city wake. The world moved on, but she no longer chased after it. Her heart was no longer heavy with what had been lost. The truth had burned everything false, leaving only peace behind. She had learned that endings were not punishment. They were the beginning of a life, unchained from fear. Outside, a child laughed, chasing pigeons across the street. The sound made her smile, soft and real. She opened her notebook and began to write again. Not about betrayal or pain, but about hope. About how even the darkest nights carry the scent of dawn. She wrote until the sun filled the room with gold. When she looked up, her reflection in the glass looked stronger. Not broken, not angry, just alive. She whispered to herself, "The truth set me free." Then she closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The air was cool, the day brand new. For the first time in her life, she didn't belong to anyone's story. She was finally living her own.